Hello, I'm Dr Bridget Goodwin from Australia, and my subject of my paper is Was Cleopatra Right? This paper is about the use of bee products and cannabis to prevent and/or treat basal cell carcinoma, and it's a case study. This is me. I have a PhD in medical history of experimentation on human skin in wartime trials. I also am a laser and dermal therapist, and I've studied medicinal herbs and clinical aromatherapy. Recently I studied apitherapy with Dr Stefan Stankicu, and I'm the president of the Australian Apitherapy Association. This is my property, Oz Apitherapy Spa, and hopefully in the future we'll be more established in apitherapy and we can do apitherapy treatments here. I'm also an educator in medicinal cannabis, and my interest in herbal medicine led me to study cannabis medicine also, and I was asked to write some courses for Australian doctors when they were told they had to start prescribing medicinal cannabis. So I've also written courses on cannabis for skincare and beauty, and they're available online at readyforcannabis.com. As many of you know, Australia is famous for its beaches, and Australians are famous for being big beach goers. And unfortunately, we're not very good at sun protection. So as a result, Australia has the highest rate of skin cancer in the world. In 2020, the research site Statista reported the countries with the highest rates of skin cancer worldwide, and Australia had 34 cases per 100,000 population. So it's one of the most common cancers in Australia. Currently, the mainstream way of treating basal cell carcinoma is through surgery, radiation treatment, or chemotherapy. So this presentation explores an alternative treatment that uses none of these conventional methods, but it looks at apitherapy and recent developments in cold plasma and cannabis as an alternative solution that may be possible. As part of this study, I actually wanted to do a bit of a dive into ancient Egypt, because when you study cannabis and when you study apitherapy, ancient Egypt comes up constantly, but it intrigued me that people weren't talking about putting them together. So I wanted to explore how it was used in ancient Egypt and whether it's something we really need to be rediscovering. So honey has been used for centuries as a medicinal remedy because it's thick, because it has hydrogen peroxide and creates a barrier against infection. The earliest recorded use of honey for medicinal purposes comes from Sumerian clay tablets, which state that honey was used in 30% of Egyptian prescriptions. I wanted to look into all of the methods of healing that are recorded in the old papyrus. I of course couldn't get to see those, but I studied the Egyptologists and the researchers who also went looking for ancient prescriptions. The papyrus that I was just showing on the previous slide describes combining frankincense and honey in linen-soaked bandages, honey mixed with aniseed, sycamore as a gargle for treating mouth ulcers, and many more recipes. In his book, The Medical Skills of Ancient Egypt, J. Worth Estes says, some of the raw materials specified in the medical papyri were used as vehicles in which the active ingredients were dissolved or suspended, or which permitted them to be compressed into solid lozenges or pills. 1550 years BC, propolis was mentioned, the black wax, in an Egyptian papyrus, and it suggested that propolis was used together with other active ingredients in the secret methodology the pharaohs used for mummification. It's even suggested that the way bees incarcerated invaders in their antiviral resin, propolis inspired the ancient Egyptians to carry out the embalming process using propolis as part of this process of preservation. The Ebers Papyrus, 1550 BC, describes medicinal cannabis. Other ancient Egyptian papyri that mention cannabis are the Ramesseum, the third papyrus, 1700 BC, the Berlin Papyrus, 1300 BC, the Chester Beatty Medical Papyrus, 1300 BC, and the ancient Egyptians are recorded as using hemp for relieving pain, in suppositories for hemorrhoids, for relaxation, for treatment of sore eyes, and there's just many references to using cannabis in ancient Egypt. It's believed that medicinal cannabis was used in ancient Egypt as many as 5,000 years ago, and some speculate that the depictions of the Egyptian goddess of writing, Sishat, are brimming with cannabis-inspired themes. In many paintings, she is shown suspending a star-shaped leaf above her head and holding a fibrous rope. Cannabis was widely used in ancient Egypt, and it's frequently been reported that the famous Queen Cleopatra used cannabis and bee products in her beauty regime and for health. And this is highly feasible given the reports of the availability of both in ancient Egypt. Based on historical research, the great cannabis researcher Dr. Ethan Russo also took a dive into ancient Egypt to find out how cannabis was used, and he described how it was often combined with honey for delivery, and it was administered by mouth, in the rectum, vaginally, on the skin, in the eyes, and by fumigation. So it was very widely used, and often together and with other medicinal plants. In modern medicine, we like to talk about scientific-based evidence. And fortunately now, these ancient medicinal treatments, both bee products and cannabis, have a lot of science to prove their effectiveness. So it's just interesting, I think, to look at putting them together. There's been a lot of research on Manuka honey, and it's known as being, very effective as an antimicrobial. This comes from the Leptospermum scoparium tea tree, which is found both in New Zealand and Australia. Bee venom has been used more increasingly in skincare because of its rejuvenating effects and its active effects on blood circulation. And it's just known to have many other qualities, including regeneration of connective tissue, which is probably one of the reasons it's so effective in the treatment of arthritis and other joint conditions. So it's quite useful to use as a topical as well. Bee venom has a structure combined with beehive, with honey, propolis, that actually works in a most effective way for skin rejuvenation, and it's very effective to put into skin serums and creams for skin rejuvenation. Propolis has been studied a lot also for its anti-tumour qualities, and there's quite a lot of science on this, as I'm sure you'll see at this conference, as was very, very widely published. We have a prominent Australian researcher on Kangaroo Island propolis called Professor Colin Duke from Sydney University, and he has described a type of propolis that's gathered from a sedge plant in Kangaroo Island, which has very, very high anti-cancer properties. And also, propolis is known for tissue rejuvenation and for shrinking tumours. There's also quite a bit of science on this. So the Apitherapy Handbook has documented how honey has been used since the 1950s, also for cosmetics, and bee products have occurred in many commercial cosmetics that we're probably not that aware of. We've probably taken for granted a bit. Beeswax is a frequent ingredient in quite a lot of cosmetic ingredients. So the notion of combining cannabis with bee products has also attracted interest from dermatologists, and in a book called Integrative Dermatology, the use of cannabis-infused Manuka honey has been studied for its anti-inflammatory effects on the skin and also as an effective treatment for acne. So, as most of you know, CBD, cannabidiol, is the non-psychoactive derivative of hemp, and it's been shown to have calming anti-inflammatory effects And when combined with the healing properties of Manuka honey, it has significant benefits for the skin. So medicinal use of propolis dates back to the ancient Greeks and Romans and Egyptians, who noted propolis had a powerful effect on wound healing, was also antimicrobial, antiviral, antifungal, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and was generally, or is generally, very effective in the treatment of skin. Bee venom is particularly prominent in China and Eastern Europe, and is becoming increasingly popular in Western countries for skincare and anti-aging properties. Mostly, as some of you will understand, bee venom can be farmed by beekeepers with special equipment, and it can be converted into a powder that can be incorporated into skincare. So you don't have to actually have bees on your face like this poor lady in this image. So cannabis, as many of you will know, works on what we call the endocannabinoid system, which was only discovered in the 1990s, that our bodies have what they call CB1 and CB2 receptors all through our bodies and our brains, and that cannabis works as an anti-inflammatory, as an immune booster, it's calming, it's got lots of properties that are very similar to bee products in terms of being antioxidant, anti-tumor, and so the idea of putting them together just seemed to be a very powerful combination. Phytocannabinoids are the cannabinoids that come from plants, obviously, and they're known to be anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, anti-aging, anti-acne, and just generally also very, very good for your skin and your health. The reduction of anxiety is obviously something that also helps with skin just as well as our general health. So cannabis is great for that, and this is one of the reasons it's so anti-inflammatory and so soothing. So back to my subject on the use of beehive products and cannabis to treat basal cell carcinoma after our little dive into ancient Egypt. I wanted to come back and explain to you what we actually did for this treatment. And when you see what we did, it will make sense as to why I wanted to go back and explore what the ancient Egyptians did. So there's been a lot of modern day science now on cannabis and bee products. So the idea of putting them together is very interesting, and I think isn't really discussed very much, which was why I wanted to raise it at this conference. So bee venom has all of these activities. It can work on rheumatoid arthritis, it can work on all sorts of parts of the body. And I just wanted to look at this alongside another chart, which is about the benefits of cannabis, in this case CBD and CBG. So some of you may know CBD is cannabidiol, CBG is cannabigerol. These are the cannabinoids from the cannabis or hemp plant. And very much like bee products, they have very similar anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, neuroprotective, tumor reduction, relieves anxiety. And in the case of CBD, reducing epileptic seizures. Some of these effects are obviously still being discovered and researched, but have really impressed modern medicine, and which is why they're becoming increasingly popular around the world. So why not use them in skincare? Some of this study also is coming out of Melbourne recently in Australia. So the idea of cannabis also having antibiotic properties in the post-antibiotic world. Many more studies on cannabidiol and cannabigerol which explore these things, and if anybody would like any of these references, I'm happy to supply them. So let's go back to basal cell carcinoma. What is basal cell carcinoma? It's really a sun cancer that starts to grow on the surface of your skin, and if it's kept unchecked, it can actually become quite nasty. So it's spread from the skin to other parts of the body, and it can move into the bone and other tissue if it's not kept in check. So the tumours start as small shiny bumps, usually on the nose or other parts of the face, but you can get them on any part of your body, and many Australians have them because we're famously terrible at looking after ourselves in relation to sun protection. So the classic allopathic treatment for basal cell carcinoma is usually surgical removal, what's known as Mohs surgery, and that means going in and cutting it out. There is also techniques of cryosurgery, freezing, but the most popular seems to be Mohs surgery, that is a surgical removal. Sometimes this surgical removal is very dramatic, and such as this woman here who's basically had the tip of her nose removed, also requires plastic surgery to recover from the removal of the basal cell carcinoma. And the skin cancer treatment that comes with basal cell carcinoma can be quite disfiguring and very traumatic for people, but commonly people share the stress of going through this and they assume that this is the only way, which is something that intrigued me about the case study we're talking about today. So in Australia, we have a very famous model called Deborah Hutton, a very beautiful woman who's been on our magazine covers and on television screens since the 1980s. And she went public very recently about how she also had to have very dramatic skin cancer surgery, basal cell carcinoma surgery on her face. So she actually revealed all to the media, really as a way to warn people to be more careful in the sun. But the person that I'm describing in this case study said to me, I don't want to be like Deborah Hutton, and I really didn't know what she was talking about until she explained to me how Deborah Hutton had revealed this to the Australian public about just how disfiguring the surgery had been for her to try and remove basal cell carcinoma. And this is what Deborah Hutton put on her Instagram page, which is really encouraging people to get their skin checked. She says that she had been through this before, 9 years before. She knows that her skin will recover ultimately, but she's really warning people to please get your skin checked. So I was approached by a Gold Coast beauty salon owner where I was doing some skin rejuvenation training, and she approached me to work on her skin because I was doing training in a thing called plasma fibroblast using cold plasma, and she came and asked me would I work on her basal cell carcinoma. So this is cold plasma. It's being used in the FDA trials, actually on tumours. So cold plasma itself is like, when they say cold plasma, it's more room temperature plasma. So it doesn't burn, doesn't hurt, but it's very effective also at tumour reduction. So this is a treatment, a skin rejuvenation training we're doing with cold plasma. Diane approached me about her skin cancer, her basal cell carcinoma, and she said, can you do something? And I said, well, no, I can't, because you really need to go to a doctor and have it removed. So she went to the doctor, came back, said, yes, the doctor confirms it's basal cell carcinoma, gave us permission to go ahead, and the doctor has said to her, when it doesn't work, come back and I'll cut it out. So we actually worked on Diane's face. This is the picture immediately after the treatment. You can see the tiny little dots on areas we worked on. And the idea is that we numb the skin, we treat it with the cold plasma device, and then I really encourage Diane to use bee products for aftercare. That was propolis, Manuka honey, and bee venom cream to help rejuvenate the skin after the treatment. So we first of all did the cold plasma treatment, let the skin healed, and then we really went to town with the bee products. And you can see here, these are images a few days after the treatment, and her skin is healing. She reported to me that the basal cell carcinoma scabs fell off on her bed sheets, and I think this is probably about a week later, 2 weeks later, that her skin was clearly starting to heal, and she was very excited and very pleased with the results. So as you can see, Diane's face kept clearing, her face looked great. I think she had her 65th birthday in October last year, and she was very pleased. Everyone was telling her how great she looked And she was so pleased that she didn't have to have the facial surgery to get rid of the basal cell carcinoma. So this was a great success, and she was still taking bee propolis internally, taking some tincture every day, and also the bee venom, Manuka honey and propolis cream that I'd made her, which she was very pleased with. And then of course I started studying apitherapy because I was so fascinated by how successful our treatment appeared to be. And that's when I really fully understood, or started to fully understand, the extensive anti-cancer properties of bee products, of propolis and other products from the hive, and just wanted to know more. But unfortunately, after some time, Diane stopped taking the propolis. She was experiencing some personal stress. She was drinking Chardonnay every day, and she rang me up because she was very distressed that the basal cell carcinoma was coming back. So I remembered from studying apitherapy that Bodog Beck, in his famous 1930s book called The Bee Venom Bible, says that alcohol is absolutely forbidden during apitherapy, bee venom treatment, because it negates it. It's actually reverses the effects. So I suggested to Diane she try not to have the wine, but she said she didn't want to do that. So that's when I suggested that we bring in cannabis to the equation. So Diane got a script from a medicinal cannabis pharmacy and started taking some cannabis tincture. And we also organised for her to have some of that tincture combined with the bee venom, Manuka honey, propolis cream. And what happened was her skin started to clear again, which was really wonderful. This is the bee venom, Manuka honey, propolis face cream that we also later added some cannabis to, because we needed to ramp this up. And what actually happened then was, well, I actually made lots of other beautiful little apitherapy creams during COVID, and here they are. But what actually happened was her skin started to clear again. So we managed to turn it around. First of all, we were disappointed that it hadn't worked, but then once she brought the cannabis in, it seemed to give it extra strength. So it was important to think about prevention. And so Diane is actually still taking the cannabis and the propolis tincture, and she's still using cream. And yes, I'm hoping staying out of the sun, because that's obviously the biggest warning. So when the medicinal cannabis came in, everything turned around again and her skin cleared again, and it's still nice and clear, and Diane is very, very happy about how this treatment worked, and she did not have to be like Deborah Hutton and have a large amount of facial surgery. So these are pictures taken last week, no makeup on, and Diane's very, very pleased, as you can see. And so I wanted to just talk about linking apitherapy with cannabis medicine from this case study, because apparently, well, we know from nature that bees love cannabis flowers, and they love to make cannabis honey or hemp honey, and all of them seem to have such amazing health benefits. So when it comes to skin cancer in Australia, I think it's important to look at other ways we can possibly manage its treatment, because this is a national pastime. Many of us suffer too much from overexposure to the sun. So in conclusion, the parallels between cannabis and bee products show a natural synergy. They're both antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, antiviral, anti-tumour, and have similar benefits for human health. So it seems to be the ancient Egyptians, including of course Cleopatra, had it right when they combined cannabis with bee medicine for both health and beauty. Their bioavailability and ability to blend together to make non-toxic treatments, both topically and internally, helps to provide a potent combination in the treatment of basal cell carcinoma. And this is just a footnote to this story. As my interest grew in this, I applied for a license legally to grow industrial hemp on my property, and this is a picture of me a few days ago with my brand new hemp crop coming up. So this is something else to enjoy. Thank you very much for your time.